This is Debby Beece for the Historical Society of Hastings-on-Hudson Oral History Project, interviewing Debby Gaines at 65 Burnside Avenue. It's April 21st, 2011. And I'm going to put this right here.
Do you need more room than that? You can have it.
No, it's all fine. Okay, Debby.
Are you with Deborah?
I am a Deborah, but I just use Debby.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. With an H on the end?
Yes.
Deborah.
Yes.
And do you have an Ann next to it?
No.
Okay.
No. So, Debby, why don't you give us some background on you? How you got to Hastings?
Oh, boy. Okay. We got to Hastings because we knew we were living, we were living in the Bronx, on Bailey Avenue. Allie had just returned from being World War II. He had been in the Army for almost 5 years. The last year was spent as the Oberleutnant, or the first lieutenant. As the first lieutenant in charge of Stuttgart in Germany, where he had been for over 2 years, fighting the good fight, and saw what no other human being should ever see. The horror tales are even worse than what has been reported. He came back, and I will tell you more about a letter to Debby, which finally came out of a letter that he had written. But how he came to Hastings, I have to think for a moment. But when he returned, we had lived with his parents for a while and got to know a most marvelous man, a Dr. Albert Schweiss, and his wife, Jacqueline Schweiss. He was our doctor in the Bronx, and they had found a house to live in. The house was on Pinecrest Drive, that beautiful big mansion. As you come off Warburton and come up that narrow little road, the first house on the right, would you believe $18,000? I know. But Jacqueline was a born hostess. And she and Albert wanted my Albert and me to move to Hastings. They just thought it was the grandest place. And they explained that one of the reasons they got the house they did for $18,000 was because a lot of the white people on Pinecrest were running like hell. Black people were beginning to move it, including Kenneth Clark, who was already there, but other black families were going to move in, which was terror. It was a horrible, oh my God, what do we do now? Let's get the hell out.
And what year was this, do you think?
Let's see, we moved in 1954, so this had to be in the very early 50s. Mm-hmm. When something like that was still, if you can believe it, rampant. Anyway, but that's how the Schweisses got their house. And we indeed decided, sure, we're going to look in Hastings. We did look in those days, having no place to live. And Al had to get a job coming back after a war, and there were so many veterans who were trying to find a place for themselves. He was a teacher by trade. He taught at City College in New York. And after the war, or during the war, he met up with a Count Carlo Giulini of Italian-Swiss extraction. And the Count loved Al very much. In later years, we went to Italy and Switzerland and visited with him and his wife and his family of 4 children. And we were wondering about whether or not we should get to Italy. But that got turned down after a while. It wasn't going to work. Al's parents were getting old. His father ran a grocery store in the Bronx. And that was also the reason, parents getting older, unable to travel, far. So we were tempted to move out to Long Island, or as they pronounce it, Long Island. The houses, we could have gotten one for $13,000. That would have been perfectly adequate. But anyway, and I'm trying to remember the exact times, but by then we did have our first child, Elizabeth. Yeah, we did. Yeah, which is another reason we were looking for a house.
Mm-hmm. But did you know anything about Hastings at the time?
Not really, just through the Schweisses. Okay. They loved it. They just thought, and Esther Decker, who lived here, was a headliner in the New York Times, and we wanted to move where she was because she was one of those marvelous vocal ladies who fought for the right, and we were very political.
Uh-huh.
So she convinced us in a way. We never met her before that. We had never met her, but we loved the idea of strong political feelings, which were very similar to ours. And we looked and looked and looked, and I met the most wonderful realtors. We finally realized we could not raise $25,000 to buy a used house. We just didn't have the money. One must laugh when one realizes what $25,000 was in those days. I mean, Al still didn't have the job that he was happy with and still searching, finding his way. So, Mrs. Farmer, I remember, was her name, said, what about a piece of land and you could build? Well, in the apartment house that we were living in, by then, we'd already moved away from Al's parents' home. And we found an apartment house on Pelham Parkway, near the zoo, not far, walk to the zoo. And we got that because my husband charmed the landlady. It's an amazing thing. He did that a lot. And I'm trying to get the sequence correct. So we looked at all the houses that we could in Hastings, along Warburton, along Farragut. Any house that was empty, we looked into. And Mrs. Farmer suggested perhaps land. We were interested in that because the people who lived on the 3rd floor, in the apartment just under the 4th floor where we lived, the husband taught architecture. And he designed a house for the people on the 2nd floor. And so we started thinking about it. And we found a piece of property, this very property, the one we were sitting on, and we built a house on it instead of trying to find a house. It wasn't working. We built the house. The original plan was for a house that looked like what a child draws in school. Nothing but the plain old house, a split level. We've, of course, added on to it quite a bit. And we were very, very happy with it.
Now, did you find that Hastings had people that also felt the same way you felt with your political views?
After a while.
In the beginning?
Well, we were settling in something. I know that I, who came from a very poor family, lived on a farm for the early years of my life, didn't...
Where was that?
Boston Spa. Ballston.
Okay.
6 miles out of Saratoga. The wealth in Hastings was a little... Well, I didn't quite understand it or handle it. I was so impressed with Burnside Drive. I just, my God, we're going to live here. Wow. Of course, it turned out that they were just plain normal people, just like us. And, no, it didn't take too long.
Mm-hmm. And your friends on Pinecrest.
Yeah.
And the controversy there, did you stay involved in that at all?
For some time that it took, but Al became part of the fair housing committees. We were, of course, we were Democrats. Yeah, we became involved a little bit in the local politics. And, of course, the national politics. It was a natural for us. Al, even more than me. He was a born politician, a lover. He taught economics, for one thing. He was very bright. And I do remember when we had meetings at the auditorium in school, people were talking, at that time, who owned all of that property on the river?
Oh, Anaconda?
Anaconda.
Yeah.
They were really becoming a little difficult to handle. And we had a lot of problems.
How so?
They wanted, I can't remember the exact details, but they wanted to purchase the estate right behind us, the Burke estate.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
For business reasons. And we saw a number of things. There was a company that wanted to buy it. I've forgotten what they were, as it would have been their offices. But I've forgotten the name of the company. But it had to do with chemicals. And we didn't want that. Nobody wanted that. And we didn't want Anaconda to buy as much as they could afford to buy. Eventually they left.
Yeah.
So that was good. And sold the property, not directly to the school at first. I'm a little...
Oh, well.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah. And then you got very involved in a lot of things in town.
Yeah. There was that time...
You were very active.
Yeah. You got to know Bonnie Bird, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Florence Katzenstein, for another.
And tell me about these people.
Bonnie and her husband, Ralph Gundlach. She kept her...
Yes.
You know that?
Yes.
All right.
Well, I went to school with her daughter.
Ah.
Heidi.
Okay. They bought the house. I forgot who owned the house originally. But then Bonnie and Ralph moved there. And we were fortunate enough to become friends. And the people we met coming in and out of the house were just marvelous. Paul Draper, dancer. Earl Robinson, composer. I met Paul Robeson when we went to his concert in the city. I didn't meet him at the home. Mm-hmm. Oh, great story there. But can I tell it?
Sure.
Okay. Whenever we went out with the Gunlacks, the men would meet Bonnie and me in the city. We would walk to whatever theater we were going to. It was mostly for theater. We were constantly stopped. Bonnie, I got the gig. This one got the dancing, this one an actor, an actress. And by the time we got to the theater, she had spoken to 6 or 7 people. Mm-hmm. It never failed. Well, anyway, we went to see Paul Robeson in one of his concerts. We did know that when Paul Robeson had a problem, and the Gunlacks were living in California, Paul Robeson had a difficult time finding a place to live. So he lived in the Gunlack house for quite a time. So they knew each other very, very well. Anyway, after the performance, we went backstage. Paul, very tall guy, so he sees Bonnie. He calls her to the fore and hugs and kisses and how are you and so on. Big fat hugs. And I follow. I'm not letting this go. And I look at him and I say, putting my elbows up, me too. He lifts me by my elbows, plants a big fat kiss on my cheek, and lets me down.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I've loved him always. I remember once in a chorus that I was singing with, well, we were in New York City, and I was still a teenager. Earl Robinson had composed the Ballad for Americans. In 76, the sky, that one. Mm-hmm. And he said it was being performed at the Madison Square Garden of that time. And our chorus did the backdrop. We sang whatever was necessary behind Paul Robeson, the entire Ballad for Americans. Oh, that was a wonderful evening.
And Bonnie was instrumental in getting you involved in these things in town?
Well, Bonnie herself, she and Rosemary Eaton, for the most part, decided that it was time for some kind of lessons to be taught to children. Music lessons, dancing lessons, and so on. And so we had a few meetings about fostering this. We didn't quite know where it was going to go, what we were going to do, but to get a couple of good minds together. Mm-hmm. And the Hastings, not river towns, the Hastings Creative Arts Council was born.
Okay, and what year was this, do you think?
Oh, boy. I know that the quilt was in the 1980s. This had to be about 1970-something. You know, I can't remember.
That's all right. Mm. And the goal was to provide educational classes in the arts?
That's right. Mostly for the children. And the next thing you know, you've got all these excited artists and dancers and singers and so on who are very excited about this because this organization lives to this day.
Yes, it does. Yes.
And it's not as exciting as it was.
It's not.
It really...
What does it do now? I'm not even sure.
No, I don't even know. Mm. But the participation of the rest of the community is not the way it was when we were part of it. And we had things to do. We took over the property where Dr. Draper's, where the Draper's property.
Mm-hmm.
And we had big picnics, and we had a tag sale. We sponsored artists, had shows. We started speaking with people who were experts in their fields. They'd come and speak, and we had an audience who listened, asked questions. And that was very enjoyable. We had dances. Oh!
How did you do all this? How did you put it together?
Enthusiasm, giggles. We had such a good time. It was great.
Did you need to raise money?
Yes, once in a while. Yeah. Yeah, there were things we wanted to sponsor. So we had a lot of balls.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of dances.
And those were the money raisers?
Yeah, well, they had to pay to come in, that's
Mm-hmm.
true. And BY, your own bottle. BYOB. Do you know what that means?
Oh, sure.
What
Bring
that
your own
meant?
booze.
Yeah, and a lot of time was spent running around asking people, begging people, threatening people, so we could use their homes. That's not as easy as it sounds.
No, I'm sure.
But, Ruth Rabel. She was one of the dynamite people who, when she took over as president, we had a ball. We made it a medieval ball. And I was working at Norcross at the time, and they would send me all the next year's wrapping papers. And this year they had flocked papers, beautiful designs. I don't know if you know what flocking is. I'm not sure I can describe it. It's like velvet. And done in designs in the old-fashioned way against a flat matte background. Mm-hmm. So it looked very medieval, or at least very, very old, mm-hmm. so it would pass. And the house that we had was one that had just been vacated because it was for sale. And so we had the entire house. And there was one wall that I decorated by having all the trustees and the mayor give me photographs of face size, actual size, and I put them in these brocade. I made these marvelous medieval costumes flat against the wall. In other words, you cut papers, paste them flat, put the faces on them. I had such fun doing it, I can't tell you. And a lot of other decorations. And I decorated for almost all of the parties. One of them had the names of everyone who came or who bought tickets. Mm-hmm. The letters, all done in tissue paper, cut out with flowers on them. It looked nicer than a speech.
And the Creative Arts Council, then, you sponsored classes for students who wanted to learn oil painting?
Yes, like that.
Yeah.
I didn't have much interest in that part.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly what happened. Now, Gary Bates, later on, started the summer camp, or the equivalent of summer classes for children. It has grown since.
And the summer, is that the same as the Hastings Recreation Summer Camp?
I don't know.
Is that different?
I don't know.
And then you But this is the group that you managed that also sponsored or became the Jock Lips. Sorry.
Well done.
Yes. Well, why don't you talk about that? The sculpture.
What
and that
a
week,
time! What a time
and
that was.
How that came about, and what you did with that.
Well, we knew that we wanted a piece of his work.
And he was living in Hastings?
He was in Hastings.
Do you know where he lived?
Oh, sure. On the way out, going towards Warburton, he had a studio where the cutoff is. And his house, his home, was in a different place. The house was Warburton Avenue, going towards Yonkers, south, on the left-hand side, after the little stream, the little river. Because that was one of the houses we looked at when we were looking for houses. He lived there. They had, with his second wife, and they had the daughter, Loya, who went to Hastings School, yes. And the contemporary of my second child, Loya was a lovely young woman, but Lipschitz himself was a prince. He was one of the most darling men. He had big blue eyes, and they twinkled, and he just yummy. There is a whole issue of the society given over to my mother meeting with Lipschitz in his studio. Well, you do have it, I'm sure. You have access to it. But what happened was, when my mother, who was elderly, of course, came here and she saw some of the books on Lipschitz, she went, oh my God, they came from the same town in Lithuania.
Wow.
Her father had known the family. His first wife, my mother said, was introduced to Lipschitz by her family. And she wanted me to get to meet him. I resisted. I didn't want to bother the great man and so on. But Mama is very... Look, I really want to meet him. I telephoned. And he said, okay, Monday, I have 15 minutes. Okay. So we went down. Mama get all dressed up. And we come into the studio, not his home, the studio that is, I wish I could describe, it's off where the aqueduct is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the pit. Well, we go in, and the two of them, look at each other to meet each other, and they start talking in English. Then a little Russian, a little Yiddish, a little French. 15 minutes turned into 2 hours. And when his Lipschitz assistant comes in and says, you really have an appointment now. I said, oh, okay. And we got up, and my mother went out of the door like a Chagall painting, flying. Her feet never touched the ground. She just flew out. It was beautiful. And he was so sweet to give her the time.
Did he use the town services? Was he involved in the town?
He was involved in that. You'd find him walking on
Main Street?
Main Street and Warburton.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved to go to the Center restaurant, the one that was there then, because it's expanded.
Yes.
You may remember, sure. And was so friendly and warm. most of the artists knew him by name, but he knew them by name. He was just a nice man in so many ways.
How did it come about that the statue was given to the town? And what did you...
I think the Creative Arts Council actually had a lot to do with that one.
And you were involved at that point?
It was not in getting the statue. Mm-hmm. I was involved in all of the stuff of making the performance, that kind of thing, and putting together all of the, getting someone to write some music for it, having my own daughter, too, second child, perform with her guitar at the auditorium.
How did the whole week idea come about?
That I don't remember. That I don't. It was not my brilliant idea. But it probably was Bonnie.
Bonnie.
Probably,
mm-hmm.
Bonnie, yeah.
And you helped raise money for the statue?
Well, everybody did.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody did. Because for the pouring of the pedestal, of the stand, because the statue was really given. Mm-hmm. And it was the pedestal we had to buy.
Right.
Had to be poured. Something like that. Close enough. Yeah. And
how was that statue selected? Did you have
I think he selected it.
He selected it.
I think so. I think we were so happy to have anything. And that statue is very much like the statue that he gave in England to a church, I think in Ely, E-L-Y. I think it was the same statue poured from the master plan. And what he said was something about, I, a Jew, donate this to people I love of Ely after the war. Ely obviously suffered a great deal. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how he got involved in that. I just know that he was very aware of being a Jew and wanted this church.
Okay.
I don't know if it was a church or a cathedral.
How did you, so you spent, how much time do you think you spent at the Creative Arts Council? How many years?
15?
Oh,
no,
time.
I can't remember.
That's fine.
I was there from the beginning, and we made the quilt in 83, I think.
That's the Hastings quilt?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that.
I think that was my idea. I don't remember.
I think because people think it's your idea.
It probably was. The problem with saying something is your idea is you suddenly become the one who has to put it together, which is a terror most people face. So you don't say anything. You're just there to pat backs and say, oh, sure, I'll help. I just don't want to do the main thing. But I was it. So we did the usual thing. Find out if it's really a popular idea. Of course it is. You're going to do it, Debbie, you can do it. Then deciding on what to put on the quilt. There you have help. You have everybody who knows anything. I'm losing some of the names of people. Photographs. I'm trying to think of the man who went around and photographed Hastings from one end to the other. What was his name?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh.
The goal of the quilt was...
to involve, again, to involve the the whole community. We involved of all the people who did volunteer. There was one man, so that was good. But I started writing letters to everybody who a known seamstress, someone who worked with fabrics, everybody. And the response was wonderful. It was really, really wonderful. And the first people we would meet here, the first people would have the choice of subject. You've seen the quilt.
Not in a long time, but I have seen the quilt, yes.
All right, I have the picture
and
of it.
And I have the woven version of it. Isn't it the same one?
The woven one?
The one that you buy now at the Hastings Historical Society. Isn't that
it's
a
paper,
reproduction
isn't it?
Oh, I guess not. Maybe I have this wrong. There is a Hastings quilt.
Yes.
That you buy at the Hastings Historical Society. That's a woven quilt. You know, it's a regular.
Oh, but it's not the same quilt.
It's not a reproduction.
No, it's
of
an
that?
Afghan kind of thing.
Okay.
I don't think it is.
I thought it must have been patterned after that. It's got here. Let me do that.
All right. Take a break right now. I'm going to run up and get it.
Okay.
Irritated by these things. Who doesn't understand that there's certain things that you want to do, and certain things that take over the family and the house. I had a prince. The man was proud of me. He loved what I did. He complained not at all. Well, mostly not at all. But you really need support for anything you do.
Well, you did a lot, so you were very active. You worked full-time? Is that at Norcross?
That was another thing. I was a key around the neck kid. I was determined to stay at home with my children. So I did. So I worked at home.
For Norcross?
For Norcross, for Fawcett Publications, for magazines.
And what did you do?
For Norcross, Norcross wants... Let's do it in sequence. We started in Hastings. I used to decorate the auditorium for UN Day. This has got to be for 3 or 4 years. I would make flags of various countries out of poster board, different colors, put them up. One year, I made very large instruments out of paper. Anything from guitars to smaller instruments, put those around. And a friend of mine in Hastings, Harriet Pitt, said, "Debbie, for God's sakes, you can't just do it here. You do it professionally." As I said, I didn't want to work professionally anymore and go out in the world. I wanted to be with my children, literally.
You had 2 children?
2 daughters, yes. So she said, I have a friend who works for the Herald Tribune. Let me take one of the instruments and let her photograph it and see what she can do. Well, the woman at Herald Tribune said, "This is lovely. Look, I can take a picture. It's going to show up in black and white. It's not going to do a darn thing. We have a little story on you, period. I have a much better idea. Let me introduce you to Dan Blue at Fawcett Publications." So I met with Dan Blue, and Dan looked at the work, and he said, "Good, we'll buy this and this and that. Debbie, you know what? Just do what you want to do. We'll probably buy it all."
And these were designs you were creating?
These were designs out of paper sculpting.
Okay.
So I did whatever I wanted to do, and he bought it for their publications. There were a number of Christmas publications, that came out in those years. You were almost drowned in them. There may be 15 or so that came out just for Christmas. So he bought whatever I showed him.
So were these ornamental pieces
Yeah.
of paper?
These were Santa Clauses, they were angels,
Okay.
typical
Out of paper.
stuff, yeah. Then Dan showed them to Peggy Gilbert at Norcross. And so I showed my work to Norcross, and she said, we have presentations of our new line of wrapping paper, ribbons, mostly. And we show them around, May, I think. So the buying process takes place after the show, which is around May, I think. I forgot. But it was springtime. It was not. It was right after Christmas that we started working, and then had the big show, either spring or summer, where the small stationery stores can look at what is available for the next year and put orders in. At the same time, other magazines, the big ones, come and look at the show also, and they want to print pictures and how-to of what they see. So one year we had a medieval theme, one year a Victorian theme, one year a modern theme, one year, and for a while I also worked with another young man who did, not with me, but worked on the same background, medieval, Victorian, etc., etc. And so I worked for Norcross for practically 8 years, and Fawcett even longer, off and on. And worked here upstairs in the unfinished attic. And then my husband saw to it that I had heat put in, etc., and then the ceiling put in. And
Now, when you were doing the quilt, is that where you worked also?
mostly the living room.
Okay.
I didn't have enough table space up there. I had to spread it out.
Yes. But on the quilt, did you create all those individual pieces or other
Oh,
people?
no. I did... Ooh. I had all these very nice people who are listed here.
Okay.
I did this one.
Oh, it's
That
beautiful.
was Main Street. And then, of course, these, which was our symbol, our logo.
And how did you get people to do this work?
Not easily.
How did
You
do
write
it?
letters. You tell them with whom to get in touch. You put it in the newspaper. You just learn how to nag. Yeah, I'm good at that.
How long did it take?
That's hard to say, but it had to be at least 6 months. At least.
It's beautiful.
There's always someone, yes. You get someone who's very simple, and then you get someone like this.
Yeah.
And
the statue is
this one.
Very complex, yeah.
So there were,
And these were all people in Hastings?
oh, yeah. Wait, I think there was one Dobbs person, can't remember. We just love to sew, love to do these. So they would choose a photograph and take it home and play with it. And they were supplied with the fabrics.
And you chose the fabrics?
Yes. Basically, you choose the background. So the same blue for the sky.
Oh, yes.
So that part was okay.
And you designed that?
Yeah, and certain solid colors and a choice of fabrics that had some patterns on them. And then just left them to their own devices. We were here we hired a minimum wage, a woman who made quilts for a living. And she helped the ones who were totally ignorant of how to do it. and she met maybe 5 times. But this is what we got.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a great piece of work.
Mm-hmm. I was very proud of it. And then I had to, the hard part, of course, is trying to work mathematically to make sure they fit in properly.
Yeah,
sizes.
symmetry, and
Mm-hmm.
it is very beautiful.
Yeah. And this was, it started in 1963.
So it's a celebration of 20 years.
Mm-hmm. 83.
Yeah.
Oh. 93, 103. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it lasted that long.
Yeah. So, what else at the Creative Arts Council are you most proud of? The work you did there.
You know, I can't remember anything specific. It was just a warmth among the people who met at the meetings. They had ideas and gave them freely. We had some grand concerts with which I had no. I didn't participate in that or the speakers. Mostly I participated in the parties and with Ruth Rabel, that crazy yard sale thing we put on, which was before yard sales became as popular as they are now. They were fun things. We'd get the Little People's Auditorium in the schools, and we would sell stuff. Mostly we tried to keep it to artists' stuff, and not just yard goods, you know, the usual stuff, trying to get rid of what you want to get rid of.
The junk.
The junk.
Yeah. Tell me about the Hastings Historical Society and how you got involved with that. You're a co-founder of that.
Well, not exactly a co-founder, but I was one of the midwives. Yeah.
As a co-founder?
Yeah, I suppose. Florence Katzenstein. Yes, she was a woman who was born with a sense of curiosity that had me awed. She was wonderful. And she and I would take various drives around Hastings, she having found a mulberry tree. So we had to go look at that. Then she found the tree that the Indians or the Native Americans wrote a peace treaty somewhere towards the Boyce on Broadway, to where very close to where that was. I forgot where she pointed it out. She and I wandered very much across the street. There's a small white house.
Across from where?
When Broadway comes together again.
Yes.
At about that point, there's a white house that used to be, I don't know, some kind of church. I forgot what it was. And she decided it would be wonderful headquarters if we could acquire the house. Wonderful headquarters for the Historical Society.
So you had been thinking about a historical
We had meetings,
society.
that's right. We had meetings, and Florence captured anybody in a small community who had ever started a historical society, how to go about it, what to do about it, and so on. She did her homework.
Because there were others in the river towns at the time?
Not in the river towns. We were the first. We were before Dobbs Ferry. I don't know about Irvington and Ardsley, but we were the first, I believe. And we've been copied. the thing about Hastings is we used to have the gallery. We used to have the Creative Arts Council. We started the Historical Society. And now Dobbs Ferry has all of that. And what have we got? Nothing. We have a cemetery. That's it. And it's very disappointing. And there's nothing, I don't see the joy that came out of all of these things. The Historical Society keeps going nicely.
Yes.
And I remember when the house that they're in now was up for grabs, the Creative Arts Council wanted it. The Historical Society wanted it. But it was a very difficult decision for whoever was in charge to make. But rightly, it did go to the Historical Society because that's going to be forever. And it's too bad, but, you know.
Yeah.
But they do carry a lot.
So how did you get it started? How did you go about getting this?
Meeting after meeting after meeting until we started bringing in people.
Meeting after meeting with the group?
The foundation group, getting ideas together, and finally meeting with other people who seemed to be, this is good. And
so this was.
So they started growing.
A group of you and who else? You had Florence.
That nice dentist person, Finkelstein? Jerry Finkelstein? Dentist who married Virginia. I forgot.
It's all right.
It is a long time ago. But you had a lot of people who really liked the idea and were happy to work with it. So.
And then you needed to raise money for this, and.
Oh, sure. So you had all kinds of gatherings and.
To raise money.
Yeah.
And you publicized the events and.
And you had a lot of people who really were interested, like a Jenny Pingree, a teacher at school.
And then what did you do? What was your mission when you first started the Historical Society?
My mission was not to become president or secretary or treasurer. Succeeded. That was my thing in life. The ideas are good, but...
Well, you had a lot to do. You had a big family and job.
Oh, yeah.
But your idea was to gather material on the historical...
Yes. You'd get a theme going, and then speakers who would discuss whatever the theme was, like, did George Washington ever really sleep here? Or, stuff that would be interesting to people. I can't remember.
It's fine.
Yeah. I'm surprised I remember as much as I do.
Tell me about. So you're a full-time mom. You work outside. You work inside the home.
Right.
Outside the home. You're working at the Creative Arts Council.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting together the Hastings Historical Society. You're doing lots of interesting
The quilt
things.
took a lot of time.
And the quilt. How did you do all these things? It seems like an awful tremendous amount of work.
I was young, I was energetic, had a marvelous family. Mommy's doing this, so we better do that. We better learn how to cook if we want to eat. My kids learned how to cook when they had to prepare breakfast for themselves. Because after I gave breakfast to my husband, it's a complicated thing. You get commuters and
Sure.
The older one learned how to feed herself and her little sister. And they're both adequate cooks now. None of them have really taken to the culinary arts, particularly. It's fine. I do not like to cook. I never did. I'm very clever at making friends with people who do like to cook.
Good for you.
You have to be clever for
Yes.
that.
Clearly, you're very clever and
No,
very creative.
No, my idea of preparing for a dinner party is to set the table in an unusual way. That is the fun part. After that, I don't know what happens.
So tell me about the letters that your husband wrote. The letter that your husband wrote from the
yeah.
from.
He came
He
home.
was in Germany
He
when he
was
wrote
in
this
Germany, yeah. And he and his men came across a satellite of Dachau. He wrote me a letter, an 8-page letter, which you just knew the agony it took to write it. This was in April of 1945. The war is ending in Germany, and the American forces are coming in and mopping up. And so they're finding all these satellites of so many of the concentration camps. And after this, he stayed for an additional year, almost a year, as I said before, the first lieutenant of Stuttgart, and took care of settling down, the people and the ruins. It was horrible. So this 8-page letter came to me. I was working in the war industry, going down into New York every day, doing drafting and illustration for various small pieces of equipment that was being used by the Army, radios, back and forth information, things that had to have resistors and all kinds of funny little things put together. And one would make the illustrations for how to. You put this screw in here, you put this something there. I did that in California for the B-18s, for the airplanes. So I had a long career as a draftsperson. Anyway, so I was doing that in New York.
These are illustrations for small munitions
Yes.
sort of things for
Yes.
the war. Okay.
Yeah. Or in the case of an airplane, just the nacelle door. I remember that because it was
Okay.
the first thing I tackled. With every screw that comes in,
Because you're a
everything.
heavily trained artist. I mean, you knew mechanical drawing and...
Yes, and I learned much more. Yeah. So I was doing that, and the people with whom I worked did not believe that Germany had done what it had done. So I brought the letter and had them read it.
Now, was this not in the paper every day that this was happening? This was a...
Yes, it was.
But they still didn't believe it.
They know. All right, so they did it a little bit.
It's too inconceivable.
Yeah, it's wartime, so bad things happen. All kinds of excuses. Some, of course, did believe it. Anyway, the letter got passed around. It was interesting for most people to see. And I thought it got lost. That and the 13 pictures, black and white, little pictures, that came with it, the horror pictures. awful ones. And I thought I had lost it. 3 years after Al dies, I started looking through this big box of letters that I got from him, and I found it. It was there. I'd forgotten. I thought I had lent it to someone and never got it back.
So did the letters convince people? Did this letter convince people?
Some. And I think that later on, when they got all the additional news after the war was over, I think they believed it, for the most part. So, 3 years afterwards, I found it. And then I saw these small pictures. I wanted to do something with them. I had no negatives, so I wanted to have them reproduced, which was not such an easy thing then. I did try, and they came back sepia colored, which is not, it wasn't right. It had to be black and white. So I went to a party, an opening, and everybody came back to the artist's house. And I thought, these are the people to ask. And I asked how I would get photos enlarged, negatives made, etc. And a woman called Yardena Yoner, she and her husband, who is an artist.
Are they in Hastings?
Yes, they were. Mm-hmm. They moved, and Chaim has since died. Mm-hmm. But Yardena is a photographer and a teacher and an artist. And she said, let me see them. Maybe I can do something. Which was the beginning of this whole thing. This is about 1990. It's quite some time ago. She looked at the pictures and she said, I have an idea. Let me work it out. She also applied for a grant to the, I don't know the name of the people to whom one applies, but it has to do with art and it has to do with Westchester. She got it. She was the only one to get it as a single rather than as a group. Mm. And she put together a show. The photographs. Oh, darn, I should have taken those pictures down.
Oh, no.
All right.
Don't go upstairs again.
All right. She had 12 easels. On these easels were very fine kinds of paper that came down, maybe 24 by however long it needed to be, where she superimposed one page of the letter and one picture, the horror pictures. One of my grandfather, and the last information we had about him. Again, written word, one imposed on the other. Oh, I have one hanging, my grandfather. One of Allie and me on the train going to California, the first Army camp that he was sent to. Another one of Allie sitting on the tank. Anyway, these 12 hangings gave the whole story, and in the background, the tape is going. I read the letter, my voice. The letter is going on.
Very moving.
It was. It was so moving that she took photographs of each one of them. She carried them with her after the show in Hastings.
And where was the show in Hastings?
In Irvington.
Oh, Irvington.
In Irvington, the gallery we had in Irvington.
Okay.
That's where the first show. So she took photographs of it. And she had to go visit with her aunt in Buffalo, New York. She got on the plane, and seated next to her is a woman. And during the time, the two of them speak. And Yardena tells the woman what it is she had just done, and showed the woman the pictures. And this woman said, I'm a professor in Essen, I think it was Essen, one of the big cities in Germany.
Okay.
I'm a professor there. I know a man who is very, very, very interested in this. It seems that this man, a Christian, was atoning for the horrors that happened in Germany. Also, a teacher, a professor. And together, let's see, maybe he was 60, I don't know. Good-looking guy. And passionate about atoning for the horrors. Well, what do you know? The show goes on. It was well received here in Irvington, and it goes to Berlin. The show goes to all of the major cities.
Did you go?
It's been to, tell you about that. It's been to Austria. It's been to Finland. I think it is now in Amsterdam. It is still. It's over 10 years.
Oh, congratulations!
No, the first invitation that I got to go with Yardena, I had refused the first trip that Yardena and her husband took. They went there. Yardena speaks. She didn't realize how well she spoke German, but she did. She remembered it from her childhood. The parents were born in Germany, and they went to Israel. And Yardena was born in Israel. So while they spoke German in the house when she was a child, she now spoke only Hebrew and English. That's pretty good. Anyway, the show is still there. So, let's see. Where was I exactly?
The show has gone to Finland.
Yeah.
And did you
Austria.
travel to any of the shows?
No, she went first. I was not going to Germany. I was going to do anything but go to Germany.
And why didn't you want to go?
Hatred. Pure and simple. My mother's family was wiped out.
Oh.
The idea of buying even a pair of scissors made in Germany was just too much. I could not do it.
Yeah.
Finally, another trip was coming up, this time to Berlin. And I thought, I guess I have to go. Because I too spoke. Yardena told the story, and I was the living proof of what my husband had written, or to whom my husband had written. And my daughters both urged me to go. So we were going to go. 9/11 happens. So nobody went no place.
Yeah.
Well, a few years after that, the invitation was to go to Hamburg. This time, they blackmailed me into going. So my older daughter, came with me. Yardena came with her husband, and the four of us were royally treated. We slept in homes that were open to us. They took us to dinner. They fed us 3 meals a day at various places. They escorted us. They couldn't have been better. And for the first time, I felt the horror of hatred has got to go. It's got to go. It wasn't easy, but it's pretty much these.
How did you do it? How did you get over it?
I think one of the things that happened was at one of the places we went to speak, 2 younger women came to me, and as they're talking to me, they start to cry.
Aww.
They said they just found out that their fathers were both SS people, and they're trying to live it down. They can't handle it. I think that was one of the things that happened, where these people suffered also. And some of them were good. Some of them were, as they call them, righteous. So, I still won't buy a German car, but I will buy a pair of scissors.
Good scissors.
Yeah. So the heavy hatred is gone.
How do you think, so you've been in Hastings for 50, 60 years?
54.
54 years.
Yeah.
How do
No, the year 1954.
Okay,
so it is
that's-
60.
It is 60 years.
Almost.
And how do you, and your children have stayed in Hastings?
What happened about 4 years ago was that my older daughter, the one who produced for me a granddaughter and a grandson, was living in White Plains in a house that was much too large. And so she was thinking about buying a house, looking for a house. We were going through that nonsense again. And suddenly said, Ma, why don't I just build next to you? So we got all the information possible. And if you, where are you parked? Front of the house?
I went to the driveway.
Okay. Well, on the right, you see a much larger addition. And if you like, I can show it to you.
No.
But okay. We in 2006, we built it. So she now has a lovely apartment attached. The thing that makes it successful, separate entrance, separate kitchen, and it's wonderful. That's the door that leads downstairs. She has the existing bathroom and the existing playroom are part of the big room. And that addition cost more than the original house.
Oh, I'm sure.
But it's worked out beautifully. And we have grandchildren visit, and they stay in the guest room that's upstairs,
Nice.
which used to be my studio, which has now become a room.
How do you think Hastings has changed in the years that you've been here?
It's hard to know because I hardly recognize anybody. My contemporaries are dead. They're all dead.
Is Bonnie Bird is gone?
Long time ago. 2 weeks ago, on April the 6th, I turned 89. I'm very, very proud of myself, but I don't have anybody who's around to congratulate me.
Well, all those ladies at the Historical Society are dying to see you.
You shouldn't say dying.
I'm
Some of them
sorry.
will. Well, except for Nani Bolser. She's a young one. She's a good friend.
Good.
Yeah. So, but really, that's the worst part of getting old. Otherwise, I'm proud of myself. I'm thrilled. I mean, not many of us make it.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah. But you haven't noticed any changes at all in the town?
Well, during the years, you notice a lot of new buildings coming up. The center restaurant had changed from this to this, and you see different stores move in. But the change in people it's very... We used to be a time you'd walk down the street and everybody would say, hi!
Mm-hmm.
And there's very, very few people now.
Mm-hmm.
Very few.
Mm-hmm.
Fran McEachran, I haven't bumped into her in years, but she's alive, and a few others, but no one who was really close.
Mm-hmm.
But I have my family and I have my work, so
And what are you working on now?
Right now, I'm working on... I just got my first great-grandchild, which means I have to do the bumpers for the crib. I have to sew. Hands aren't working too. Clay. I would spend 15 years as a potter. but the carpal tunnel syndrome and these fingers don't work too well, so I had to give that one up. Gee, I forgot all about that. Yeah, 15 years. But the the potholes have gotten bigger and better. The changes took place over 50 years. You know, it isn't something that's just happening.
Sure.
Nothing special. Of course, the delight in the little school, that was so good. To have the little ones.
The hillside school?
Yeah, they were in the hillside still. Yeah, because everybody used to go to the one school.
That's right. I remember that little school. I went to that little school for a
You
while.
did? How long are you living here?
Well, I lived here when I was 10. We moved here. Or no, when I was 6. And then I left and went to the city. Went to college there and lived in the city.
The big town?
And then came back when I was like 28. And I'm 55 now, so it's been a while.
You are? Isn't it remarkable? You're 55. My kids are both 60. 4 and 1. You don't look the same as my mother did, for instance, at that age. My mother was an old woman at 55.
Yeah.
And you...
Yeah.
I was trying to figure.
I think it's just a lot of different styles now, you know. I think there's just more casual style and stuff. Well, there must be other stuff that you want to talk about, or is there other stuff?
I can't.
Okay. We covered the Arts Council, covered the quilt, the Historical Society, the letters. Your children went to school in Hastings.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The younger one started in kindergarten. The two daughters are best friends, and one of them is very different from the other. So they form the perfect yin-yang thing. We used to take Susie, the younger one, when I'd go to meetings, Planned Parenthood, political meetings, whatever, that women did in the daytime. And she would sit in the back on the floor with her crayons and quiet as could be, smiling, she's the kind of child people dream about having. She still is. She still is. But now, instead of being quiet, dinner table. Always. We ate together. Al at one end, the long end, Elizabeth, the older one, on the other end. And those two would argue everything. Back and forth, back and forth. So the younger one, Susie and I, were doing this. And Susie would get excited only if she thought that her father was being mean to her sister. And she'd stand up on a table and say, "Stop interrupting my sister," to her father. The bonds were so close.
Let me ask you, go back to Lipschitz for a second.
Sure.
The studio, what was it like? What was his studio like the day that you went with your mother?
It was a total glorious mess. It was things, you had to push things aside just to sit. But there were unfinished pieces, finished pieces, idea pieces, clay pieces.
What size room was it? Was it very large?
Oh, yeah. You entered, My goodness. You entered into the main room, which was very large. And back, at the very back, you had one or two doors which led to, I don't know what, maybe a kitchen, bathroom, a storage room, but I never got into that. We just stayed in the main part with all this mess. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. The interesting thing is that the windows facing in the Hudson River were all the way up at the top. He did not want to be distracted.
But he needed the
That was
light.
in his own words, yeah. He just did not want to be distracted.
Interesting.
And the river could do that.
Yeah.
So, but it was wonderfully warm and cozy. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was quite a celebrity in town.
Oh, yes.
I remember him in the black walking down the street.
Oh, you do? Good.
Yes, I do.
Good, yeah. And he loved Hastings because he had tried to live elsewhere. Being a Jew didn't help. He tried New Jersey. Did not work.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And what is it about Hastings that worked for him?
Hastings was loaded with artists and all kinds of weird UN people. Lots of UN people.
UN people?
Yeah, yeah. Good place to live. We were not as pricey as Scarsdale, for instance. We had a lot of really normal people here. And people with ideas, bright ones. We had one or two Nobel Prize winners. One lived in Pinecrest. Oh, and the other had what was the equivalent of an Indian, Native American name. Can't remember.
Yes, okay.
We're talking 60 years ago, for crying out loud. We have brains here. Artists, a lot of artists. So, and more than the rest of this part of Westchester, I think. There just seems to be a more openness about Hastings. I have not met up with any anti-Semitism here.
But you felt it in other places?
As a child.
You did?
Yeah.
And whereabouts did you?
Boston, the farm. Boston
upstate in
Yeah.
Saratoga.
Yeah. One of the first things we remember, though, as hated as Jews were, Catholics. Worse. Herbert Hoover, president, running again against Al Smith. Al Smith, a New Yorker, real New York, talks New York, Catholic. And what you heard was, rather have a goddamn Jew in there than the Pope.
Well, times have changed.
Yeah. Oh, thank heavens. Well, when we went to Texas as the second or longest place we lived in before Al went overseas, Abilene, Texas, Catholics were despised. In Texas, people don't do anything halfway. So when you hate somebody, you're like I was with the Germans. Catholics, oh my God. But the best time we had, the wives, came from various parts of the country. And one of them was Catholic. And she found a place, she and her husband found a place with Father Felderhoff, who was Catholic, a priest. Anyway, her name was Tommy. Bernadette Teresa Odelia Rademacher Schreier. That was her married name. Came from a farm in some place like Minnesota, Wisconsin, somewhere in there, from a farm, and learned how to cook for many, many, many men. You'd have the reaping season, You'd pick, at the fields of corn, of wheat, of whatever the heck they raised. And so you'd get the workers who would come in, and they had to be fed. And so Tommy, from the age of 9 or 10, was already cooking for great numbers of people. Well, we found out that Tommy was a blessed cook. She could cook anything with nothing. She was brilliant. And so when the wives, were invited to lunch, it was wonderful. And Father Felderhoff would greet every one of us with open arms, just a sweet man. I think he didn't know what on earth was happening in there. He was young. He was very young. So he hadn't met with this kind of dislike. But eventually I think they got to like him. He was a sweetheart.
Nice. Now, where is the quilt now?
The quilt should be at the Historical
It's
Society.
downstairs, do you think?
I don't know. It was for a while, but I think they have it upstairs.
Yeah.
I remember when Sue called me, there was a place somewhere, a car's ride away, where they cleaned things like this, as they do antiques. And the process was remarkable.
Yeah, I'll bet.
They cleaned it. They took out any little bugs that got there. And if there were any missing stitches, they fixed it. Then it went back to the society. And I don't know if they're hanging it at all.
It's probably
Maybe
sealed.
upstairs
Yeah,
someplace.
probably sealed. Okay.
Yeah, let's see.
Well, is there anything else, Debbie, that you'd like to...
No, only that
Having
so many of those wonderful women that I met are so great. Ruth Rabel's still a friend of mine. Lifflander has moved. I just had her name in my head. She also lived in the barn that... Oh, Jane Cameron. Wonderful person. A lot, They come in, go out of your life.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Ruth remains.
And all this volunteer work, creating these events,
Oh, boy.
changing the nature of the town.
Yes. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
It did.
How do you think it affected the town, having moved here, creating these things, making the town different? How do you think it changed the town?
I think the town grew very nicely. More accepting of strangers. Because when you consider the ethnic background of the town was basically Ukrainian. The same way Dobbs Ferry has people of Italian descent. We got Ukrainian people who are, I'm sure, have died off by now. Most of them.
For the work down at the Anaconda?
At Anaconda. I'm sure of that. Yeah. But the... we were polite, different parts of the strata of society. You found, though, they didn't mix.
Oh, they didn't?
No, there's still class.
You think?
I think so. I'm not sure about now. I hope they've grown more together. What I liked was the fact that all of these classes went to school together. And so the students got to know each other pretty well. We've had 3 reunions of my older daughter, 3 times in the past. I forgot when she graduated.
Well, when you threw the balls
Yeah.
And the parties.
Yeah.
It wasn't a mixed group.
No.
It wasn't.
No.
So
wasn't.
So the people that showed up were who showed up?
The educated career people.
Uh-huh.
Not the, although, let's see, there was a plumber's wife who was there. Mostly, there were teachers, artists, craftsmen. The way it is practically any place.
Uh-huh.
The salaries themselves are probably what determines it. We don't have any very rich people here. So there's no... They may be wealthier than most, but not exorbitantly rich. So that was not a problem. They came or stayed by themselves. No, the mix was pretty much the way it is in almost any community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When we first moved here, Elizabeth became friends with a policeman's daughter. Then there was another one. But I invited them to dinner, and they wouldn't come. I remember with, what was the name? I liked them. We were fine. But we can't return it.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't realize that was that kind of rift.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true. It was true.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about now.
Mm-hmm. So your contemporaries that you worked with on all these projects, did they mostly stay in Hastings, or did they leave when their kids graduated high school?
Some. You mean, did the parents stay?
Mm-hmm.
I think they did.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did. When they leave, I know quite a few who are now in assisted living homes.
Sure.
Especially if they became widowed, which seems sensible.
Yeah.
I'm the luckiest one. I like my kids. I like them a lot.
That helps.
They're awesome. They're awesome.
Was there anything else? I guess we should sort of kept you a long time.
It was nice.
Was there anything
nice.
you want to say that I haven't asked you?
No,
Any
really...
topic or any memory that you want people to know about all your fabulous work?
Yeah, there was one truism. I was learning... I was going with Miriam Begg, who lived here a long, long time ago. An artist. Her husband was an artist, too. And the youth center, the old one, had painting classes downstairs. And I joined them and did some painting. And one day, I was frustrated. I wasn't getting my painting right. And I said, damn it, I know how Rembrandt must have felt. And the woman standing next to me said, boy, you think a lot of yourself, don't you, comparing yourself to Rembrandt. And I looked at her and said, that isn't it. And realized Einstein's mother and my mother had the same birth pains. All people who give birth have birth pains. That you get one Einstein, you get one middle-of-the-road person, and you get one who's useless, almost. but the pain of birth is the same. And so when I wasn't getting it, I just wasn't getting it. Rembrandt had those problems.
Sure.
And I thought, yeah, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if you're good or you're bad. And you compare yourself. It's foolish. You just have to do the best that you can.
Yes.
Work with the reality of it. But keep on doing it, if that's what you love.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not great.
Oh, I don't. You've certainly done a tremendous amount.
I've been so blessed. Yeah. Look at the young people now who don't know where they're going, and it isn't all their fault. Sorry, Mr. Freud. It's not all their fault. The society just does some terrible things. It'll take longer or whatever. But I knew what I was going to do when I was 4 years old. There's no question.
That you wanted to be you were into
As
art?
an artist, an actress, or a singer, or a dancer. Mm-hmm. I knew I was going to be in one of those. I had two gorgeous sisters, so I knew that acting was not going to be for me. I did do some acting. My biggest problem was I kept forgetting lines.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
That doesn't help.
Yeah. And what do you think the young people have? Why is it harder for young people now, do you think?
The society is so unsure of where we are and where we're going as a country. We're not doing too well. We're not doing too well in the eyes of the world either. And it's very scary. And the jobs really are leaving.
Yeah.
Even the menial jobs, especially the menial jobs.
Especially, yeah.
Yeah. There was one time when I was so happy for the first time I saw the People's Republic of China on the back of a basket. China was nothing. Now, we went through a lot of our clothing just for the hell of it.
Every t-shirt.
Bangladesh, China. That's right. Philippines, China. China, China, China.
Yeah, it's completely taken over manufacturing of t-shirts.
Yeah, and you can't blame them. No, and what have we got? Very little science. Not much art.
Well, entertainment's our biggest export.
Television. Entertainment. I sometimes wonder, how can you go to the movies and watch television all the day and never get your ass up off the pillow? So they don't have the make-believe games. And from earliest childhood, I see little ones at the TV sets. And there are no ideas. The one reason I loved Florence Katzenstein was that curiosity of hers. Mm-hmm. When she was curious, she didn't go to an iPod. She didn't have them. She investigated.
Right.
And she was a fascinating woman. But she had to know, and she found out. And what have you got to know? You've got the iPod. No, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
And they don't read. Do you have children?
I do.
How old?